Welcome, everybody, to another episode in this podcast series called Maximize Your Mastermind. So, this is for mastermind leaders or purpose-driven coaches who aspire to be a mastermind leader, walking through expert guidance on people's best methods, frameworks to help you maximize your mastermind. And I am your host, Sebastian Cruz. I'm the founder of the Dream Team Network.ai. And today, we have a very special guest, Stephanie Trager, who is focused on impact investing. What is that? Well, that's about investing your resources in a way that maximizes your impact for yourself, the planet, the world, our whole ecosystem here. And Stephanie has really been a soul whisperer to world leaders and top corporate executives, helping them deploy billions of dollars with a B that are focused on impact. And so what I really appreciate about her is really this holistic thinking of, okay, what's going to do impact now? How is that going to affect the future? And really making sure everything is considered. So before I give any more away, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie. Welcome to the show. And how are you doing today?
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you for having me. I so appreciate your energy and how, like, when you share space, you're so authentic in creating a win-win space for everybody. So I just want to honor you and the work you're doing.
Thank you. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. And I know collaboration has been really through the DNA of your story from, sounds like, the very beginning. So yeah, I'd love to hear from, how did you get started into impact investing and caring about the different layers of impact and seeing it all come together?
Mm. The word impact is now interesting. Like, if we really look at the taxonomy of our evolution as heart-centered beings and creators, the word impact now as like a field, impact professional and impact investing. It's just interesting to witness and observe how this word is sort of infiltrating all over the place. And it's kind of like climate instead of using the word environment or nature. And so I like to really get to the meaning of, underneath the very high level frames. Like, impact is a frame and it can mean so many things, right?
Mm.
Positive, negative, your version of impact, my version of impact. And so, yeah, how I came to the place that I'm now is through a lifetime of activism as a teenager and advocate for and voice for ancient trees, and living in California, being a tree sitter, just falling in love with the ancient redwoods at a young age when I first saw them, and becoming an activist. So we were considered environmentalists
Mm.
back in the 90s. Um, I said after college, I had no idea what I was going to do after college, and just kind of set out like, I know I need to leave the East Coast, and went out to the West Coast to California and saw the ancient redwoods. And that was a time of literally just following the crumbs, like, okay, go here,
Mm.
go here, go here. And when I think about it, yeah, that was the most like flow of, didn't maybe it didn't even feel like it then, but in retrospect, of being guided. And so how I come to the work that I do now, just to summarize, is really through the roots of being a voice for an earth keeper, and just a protector of Mother Earth, and a reminder of our connection as Earth people here. And what does that look like now as we explore our future potential?
Mm. Absolutely. And so I know there's a few really interesting things that I find interesting about your story. And so you've got these different pieces that usually don't go together, which is, say, activism to like boots on the ground, tree sitting, making a stand for them to not be cut down, as well as like law, high level law deal, throwing a lot of travel there. So yeah, I'm wondering, because that's
Yeah.
what I find impact investing feels like such a, home for you, because you're able to look at the law, able to look at the business as well, and then look at like the roots of the activism. So I guess I'll kind of like open it up of where do you feel like you want to go? Do you want to,
Mm.
I know you have some pretty powerful parts of your story, whether it's the activism part or the law part or the business part. Where should we go?
Mm. Well, first I want to say that like when we say impact investing, it could be nebulous. So I want to clarify, like I'm not an investor. I mean, like I'm not a broker. I'm not a wealth advisor in that context. I work with and in the field of it's like an ecosystem of impact and impact investing, meaning like for me, I'm passionate about supporting people to deploy their resources, as you mentioned before, their capital, all capitals,
Mm,
social capital, intellectual capital, financial capital, natural capital, all capitals in alignment with our highest future potential. And where I like the nexus, the sort of sweet spot for me is the mindset, the transformational, the soul evolution that whether it's asset holders, resource holders, inheritors, ultra high net wealth, entrepreneurs, anyone in a wealth event, or just humans who are like, how do I tap into like really deploy all my capitals in alignment with my values?
mm,
It's a mindset shift. And
mm,
so really, I mean, this is where, that the nexus of where you and I and us catalysts really sit, transformational change agents, is the mindset shift. Like you can have the mindset shift for success. It's the mindset shift of what does it actually mean to create a living system, versus the death system or the death economy. What's a life economy? And then we address our fears, our doubts, our perceptions, our assumptions about reality in
mhm,
order to really vision the possibility of our future
mm.
and like what we can do now.
Absolutely. I'd love to double click on the all capitals uh,
Mm,
and dive into there because what I heard from that was there's these different categories of resources.
hmm
And to be in full alignment, that's what I'm feeling, is each of these types of capital are deployed based on your values. Love that. Love that. So yeah, I'd love to
Yeah.
hear capitals and just dive into like what that looks like.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, you had mentioned law. I was started off as an activist, as a human rights environmental activist, and that went into law through that window, through that trajectory. And
Mm,
then ended up, the long story, or not, but I ended up in corporate litigation for a
mm,
stint, which really tempered me and tempered my perspective on just humans and the psyche, because the thing was the complete opposite side of the fence. And once, so after leaving corporate law, like what do I do next? Because I was so out of alignment with my values. And that's when I started my coaching practice when I was in law. um I carried on in that way. And then like years later in 2016, 2015, 2016, when the UN Sustainable Development Goals kind of were birthed into the world and became were becoming more mainstream in companies and corporations, like large companies. Are you familiar with the SDGs, the UN Sustainable Development Goals?
yes. Yep.
Okay. So like 6 years ago, very few people were, unless like you were in that field. And
Yeah.
so the mission was like, how do we mainstream this? Yet what was happening was companies were, as happens is once you integrate these, you know, idealistic principles or potentials, there's like, what was the agenda behind it? That's number
Mm,
one. But
yeah.
if we look at the world agendas, but coming back to what we were saying,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it became a corporate communication. It became a
Mm,
tool. There was a lot of greenwashing, and it just, it's done good in the way that like these large frames can do in sort of a collective that's still disconnected.
mhm,
But what I said to myself, wow, this is happening. And for so many years, for decades as an environmentalist, is when nobody was on it. Now it's like the popular thing. And I could, go into companies and maybe make a living doing consulting. So I started a sustainability consulting firm around 2016 and was going that route and doing that for quite a while, when it really just the consciousness piece, like there's a consciousness piece isn't here. So that's when I was like, that's my work, is awakening consciousness, so
mm,
that this sustainability is not like this rote exercise or this intellectual exercise. It is a felt experience as earthlings, as nature, creatures of nature. And then started seeing how ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors were being, the whole field of ESG and finance was becoming a thing and becoming more mainstream. So that hopped on that bandwagon. I'm like, well, let me see if I could do something in there. Again, where's the soul? It was just this disparate experience. And so impact investing, there's a whole ecosystem, which I didn't really even know about until around 2018. And in 2019 started working more regularly in communities of impact investors, and really learning how much heart there was and how much was actually happening where wealth holders were deploying, we're set on coming up with metrics and doing as humans do, creating all of the measuring tools, but really okay, how can we really transform the economy, regenerative capitalism and systems change, and really looking strategically at how to deploy capital to create change. So that's how I got into the impact investing space.
Amazing. And one thing a lot of things I resonate with. One thing in particular is I feel like I really appreciate how I feel like you see the different layers of the incentives and the corporations, and how something may look good, like you said, on greenwashing, looks good on the outside, but what's really underneath, and being able to see this ecosystem of okay, something that's good can start off good and then be co-opted by certain interests.
Yeah.
And maybe that helps it get to the next level. Maybe it doesn't, but seeing everything, almost like seeing the matrix of what's going on. So I really appreciate that about your work.
Well, if you can see that I see it, you see it too. So I see you.
Exactly. And I believe a lot of people too that tune in here feel that as well, because I just feel like, being a student of history, human beings being human, typically tend to gravitate to having more power, more control.
Yeah.
And so just seeing what's the true incentive. So that being said, I'd love to hear, what are the types of capitals that you mentioned? Because that was new to me. That was cool.
Okay, so there's literally, it's this more human intellectualizing the game the way we do, right?
Yeah.
But there became there became this exercise, and so what was known as the six capitals, and that was financial, literally in figuring out how to measure, right? Because this is that earnest exercise of how do you measure sustainability? How do you measure impact when it comes to ESG? And so for folks who don't know, there's various stages of this investing journey where you can have traditional investing, just go into the markets and invest to create a return, financial return. There's the I don't want to do harm. So I don't want to invest in arms or, in firearms or tobacco or those things, right? So there's screens where you don't invest in that, so you avoid harm. And then there's the actual contributing to solutions. And that's where you're actually investing in things that are contributing to solutions. And then how do we know it's contributing to solutions? What are the metrics? And so for the last, maybe 15 years or more, there's been this collective journey around the ecosystems to come up with metrics and figure out how do we know what. And so there became classified six capitals. And now people are adding to it as well because it's a fun exercise. But the tangible six capitals: financial capital, intellectual capital, right? IP, human capital. That was a huge one when really looking at the S in ESG, the social, how do large corporations measure up on that social scale? That's where the DEI and all that stuff live, right? In the matrix way of saying, categories. So then there's the social and social capital. We know that on social media and in our world, it's social capital, right? Natural capital. Natural capital is an interesting one because this is where, how do you measure a forest intact? And so natural capital is looking at, the ever evolving ecosystem, or I should say, measuring measuring attempts at like measuring biodiversity, measuring carbon sequestration. So what is your natural capital if you own forests? You look at it like, wow, that's XYZ, however you measure timber, like, I don't know, like, forgot the word for measuring timber. Or do you look at it like XYZ acres of which measures into a certain amount of carbon sequestration, and oxygen producing atmosphere. So natural capital is a big one. And then manufactured. So again, it's financial, intellectual, human, social, natural, and manufactured capital. So manufactured capital would be like, you know, manufacturing, production, products.
Wow. I love this. Yeah. So insightful. I like the three types of investing, that I've never seen it that simplified before. And that's really awesome. I really love contributing to solutions. Like, I feel like that's such a clear way to evaluate. And yeah, these different capitals. Interesting. So one thing that you said that I feel like relates to this is you talked about like a dead energy system or something like that, and a life-giving system. And that's really been on my thoughts too, of like a free energy system is how it's come to me. It's like, how can we have a system where there's not loss? Just like if we put, I don't know, water through pipes, there's going to be loss through the heat or the cold. How do we have a system where there's not loss? If there it is, there's minimal, but there's like a source spark, and then everything is synergize together. So then it, grows or continues. So yeah, how do you see this all weaving together? And I'd say now as a practical practice now, and then, later we can get into what do you see as the future of where things
Mm,
are going?
mm. Well, like for the conversation, I think are you asking? So how I see it now, which is probably we've talked, I think, before. So this is probably aligned. The world is going through the Earth is experiencing a massive evolution right now, and
Yep.
so we as what?
I said, yep, it
Yeah,
sure
yeah,
is.
right. And like, there's this whole cosmic evolution happening, and they always say, the moon moves the ocean. Sometimes when people are like not really like, because you can hear the cosmos and it's like this othering. And I think right now, the deepest, like, how do we get to free energy technology? How do we get to being able to harness frequencies and just work with free energy and be these super like frequency transmitters, and be our highest evolution? It's like just starting with the connection to who we are and awakening that ancient intelligence in our DNA.
Hmm.
And so, right here, right now, I see this important need, and this is where I'm feeling called to right now. Is like, okay, connection. We like, how can I connect more so that I can support others in connecting more? Because it's not anytime I'm saying, how can other people do this? It's like, where do I need to do it first? Where is it still alive in me? So how do we connect more deeply with nature, with the earth energies around us, the invisible energies, the multidimensionality that we are, the holographic reality we're in right now, and connect to that? There's a whole, you know, thing happening, a whole life system in the cosmos. And in one way, it's like, okay, the moon moves the ocean. The moon governs women's fertility. And it's like this instant aha. Yeah, yeah, we are connected to the planets out there. And so then what's the next step beyond that? And coming back to Earth here, there's a huge movement, even mainstream now, honoring indigenous wisdom,
Mhm.
and how that is a beautiful it's supporting more rapid evolution, I think, among people, right? Is to just starting to be mainstreaming the idea of indigenous wisdom
Mm.
and the plight, I'd say, the journey of indigenous people. And yet what's interesting that I find is, as an activist when I was in the 90s, where we were working with closely in solidarity with indigenous communities, whether it was praying for the forest or, doing legal support for the Navajo Nation, fighting the burial of spent plutonium rods on their sacred land, like all of these different places. when I was young, I had this opportunity to be in the presence of earth keepers, and that woke up something and reminded me of who I am.
Mm,
And now throughout all of these years, we see this whole division, that division program of like othering, right? Oh, it's appropriation. And I mean, yet there's an honoring of indigenous people, wisdom and knowledge, and right. And then an honoring and a acknowledging of what a people had to do and go through in order to hold that and keep the wisdom, protect the earth.
mhm,
And at the same time, how do we hold that and in honor and reverence while also acknowledging we are all indigenous to this earth, and that we all have the ancient intelligence in our DNA that can remember. And the more that I witness like this, am I going on a tangent here? I, I'm just witnessing like the othering. When we other,
mm,
it creates a separation, right? So indigenous wisdom, how do we honor, but also acknowledge like this wisdom is ours, and even ancient beyond
mm,
the our early ancestors on Earth, but like 20,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, what kind of human intelligence or other intelligence was here that we are now activate, it's now that this is activating, I think, in all of our DNA, and some of us are open to it. And
mm.
yeah, that's my answer. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm wondering, say a person, mastermind leader, they are purpose driven, they see all these problems in the world,
Yeah,
and how would you guide them to contribute in a way that, is aligned with them? Because
yeah,
on one hand, we're exposed to more problems than any other humans in history through
yeah,
all the different things. So on one hand, it's like there's a never-ending stream of problems, and if we try and sprinkle a little bit everywhere, probably not going to do much, I feel like. So yeah, what do you do you help them kind of like guide into one of those areas that they really feel aligned with
hmm,
and go there? Yeah, curious what's
yeah.
your method for that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that I see a really big opportunity for everyone who is leading others and
Mm,
holding space for others and creating containers and is holding space for transformation.
mm,
That where in our hearts we are uh have a cause that we care about, right? How do
mm,
we um integrate? It's not the cause over there and then the business
mm,
over here. It's how do we integrate
mhm,
our impact lens into our business model? And
mhm,
if you look at companies, I mean, that's what I was doing with large, like huge companies. Like, how do you integrate sustainability or an impact model into the business model? It's not just volunteering or this or that, right? It's different for everybody. So it's a really personal expression.
mhm,
And now when we start to really integrate, and I think that a lot of people want to, it's not so clear how do I do that? And it really is I have a kind of a modality for this, but it's really individual. And because
mhm,
like, there's a step by step process, but it's such a individual approach that I don't even want to, say here, first you do this, then you do that.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
you know, it's and it depends on who you are targeting and in
mhm,
your business, and the outcomes that you're offering in your mastermind, for example. But I think that there's just an opportunity for everyone to be integrating an impact model
mhm,
that because not only do you have the impact, whether it's through the financial capital, intellectual
mhm,
capital, it's the consciousness of that integration that inspires other people to do the same thing.
mhm. Yeah. Okay. I've got a real world example to
Yep.
share with you. And so, a cause that I feel really connected to is an organization called Saved in America. And it's
Mhm.
retired Navy SEALs and Special Forces operators that go on missions to save kids
Love
who
it.
are stolen into sex trafficking in our very backyard, in the United States of America. So, Saved in America. yeah, it's near and dear to my heart. And so it sounds like maybe this example, you can find a cause and how that connects to my business, like Mastermind True Freedom. And I believe is like helping people have freedom, have business owners have freedom.
Mm,
And then it's helping the kids have their literal freedom.
yeah.
So it feels aligned right there. And what I realized too is, I guess that's donating in the cause area. And then probably, and it sounds like another level is investing in some type of solution within
Mm.
that realm. Would that be accurate?
Possibly. I mean, like there's so many ways to look at this. So let me ask you a question. Do you have does any resistance come up around integrating what you just said, like as your message in all channels, on all channels, promoting your, the mastermind as
Yeah.
a master, you're a mastermind leader for mastermind leaders,
Yes.
right? So in inviting people into your space and into your world, is there any resistance around tying that into your message up front?
No, no. Yeah, I'd say no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, because sometimes it's, oh, well, I don't want people to think that this is what it is. And it's confusing, right? Is
Mm,
this a mastermind or is this like the cause or what?
yeah.
But do you know what I mean? So if there was a way that, um, see, so like, again, this is different, right? It's like, it could be, okay, we have the container, the business here,
Yeah.
and then because that business gets to be speaking to more people,
Yeah.
then we have more capital to invest in it. Or maybe there's an opportunity for you to pool intellectual capital to support some part of that mission or marketing capital or something, right? Um, and which would kind of be like manufacturing capital. And so like if you were to really tie in beyond just like say beyond, it's not just because it's a huge thing. Philanthropy is huge, right? So maybe you're supporting through philanthropy. So how else can you tie it in, and how can you and then ways that protect potentially to involve your mastermind members
Mm,
in participating or in creating their own impact mission that is woven into their masterminds,
yeah.
rippling the impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Mm.
that is definitely a common thread of having some type of, percentage of such, that goes into some fund that they care about that's aligned with their mastermind. And a little
Yeah.
quick note for everybody listening too, we've definitely tested out different percentages and where I've landed as 1 to 3%
Uh-huh.
of revenue. Profit tends to be odd to be clear. Revenue is really nice to be clear.
Mm,
People have overdone it, hard to give, but then it's not sustainable with the business. So yeah, that 1 to
right.
maybe 3 found to be the actual like sustainable and most
Yeah.
simple. And yeah, so everybody ends up going that path where they feel a cause. And I guess everybody's in their own niche, whether it's relationships, uh, business, or different things. And so maybe that opens it up of ways that they can contribute or invest within that. I don't know, maybe that segment.
Yeah. And interestingly, what's another word for cause? What would you say?
Cause, mission.
Yeah. So cause feels very like separated, right? It's like a
Mm,
cause over there. The mission, your
yeah,
mission is to create this transformational space of success in mastermind leaders,
yeah,
and you're holding space for tr- evolution of
yeah.
humanity, and your mission driven focus is also supporting freedom, all freedom, right? Think about capitals. There's 6 capitals. People are coming up with more things like trust capital and this capital. But like you can think about it. What are the capitals in your mission? It could be, well, sorry, what are the 6 freedoms or something like that, right? Like how can you tie it in the way that supports all aspects of the business?
Mm. Yeah, I like that. The mission. I know that comes up in my work all the time. And yeah, it's a great point. Cause yeah, when you say cause, it does feel like outside of me. Mission is like
Part
it
of it.
feels like a river that we're flowing in. There could be a lot of us flowing towards
Yeah.
that mission.
Yeah, like to me, you represent your mission. Like Sebastian is mission freedom. Like that's
Yeah.
who he is, right? Your mission, freedom, and
Yeah.
all the ways that that plays out, it's so aligned, and it's like all overlapping, and right, like you deploy in one area, it affects it all. So yeah,
Yeah. Thank you for that reflection.
yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Hmm. Yeah. So do you have a story of somebody that came to you? Because I know you've mentioned people have uh, sold their company, made a bunch of money, and they're like, okay, I want to make sure this is used in the best way, head, heart, and higher purpose. People have also inherited money and said the same thing, or some other way that they got the money. So if you'd be open to sharing a story, we don't need names or anything like that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, a story that comes to mind and that what that conversation was between you and that person and what ended up happening would be super awesome.
Yeah. I think energetically too, even like honor energetics I'm gonna like weave like a journey of various threads of people and
Okay.
experiences. So like for each of the scenarios, so hypothetically, maybe not, someone has a wealth event where, they a company was sold and a lot of money lands in their lap,
Mhm.
8, 9, 10 figures.
Mhm.
And it's like, whoa, it's so interesting to be, I am not an asset holder at that size. And so to be holding space for somebody who's really navigating the very unique energetics of that and emotional and like the psychic, all of what that is, um, it's different with inheritance. Actually, there's each kind of category has its own
Mhm.
bag, right?
Makes sense.
And but the one thread here is this question of how much is enough, right? Because regardless of how much money one has, well, something I've witnessed because I've worked with so many different people, regardless, and in my own journey, like the one thing I see is like this question of enoughness,
Mm.
um, and scarcity, and that energy, that frequency of scarcity when it comes to money, even in wealth holders, even in people who have absorbed exorbitant amounts of wealth,
Mhm.
right? And then the responsibility, the guilt, shame, like a lot of different, it plays out a lot of different ways. So hypothetically, someone comes into this large amount of wealth, and it's like it's so if first it's an embodiment experience, right? Like how do
Mhm.
you embody who who is it that is now stewarding this wealth, this capital? What is wealth even, right? It's money. Money, let's call it what it is. And and then again, like how much do you actually have access to? We talk about wealth as these large numbers. There's a lot of people who have a ton of money or assets in their, they're asset holders, yet there's so little that's liquid, or like,
Mhm.
so there's just so many variations and like judgments that from the outside in, that in turn is like a project that people, who are in the experience can feel these projections internalized. And so it's this journey of like, what's the money story? And like, what does this all mean? And decoupling all of that. And it's kind of the same thing as if you were navigating a poverty story as
Mhm.
a wealth story. It really is sometimes. And it's getting to that place of equanimity and an enoughness of self. And but it is quite different because now you have a certain set of resources. And then the question is, well, how much is really enough?
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. And you don't have to feel bad or ashamed if it's like a lot. That's enough, say, to measure for the rest of your life, with inflation and just the cost of living and the formulas that you can plug into to literally come up with the compound, how this money is going to compound over time. How much do you really need for the
Mhm.
next 50 years of your life or 60 years of your life? And whether you have children or like, how do you do that kind of plan and
Mhm.
then like really have a surplus number?
Mhm.
And when with that surplus number, once you feel that deep, deep, deep enoughness, well, like what now? How do we deploy that? What do you want to do with that?
Mhm.
And for some people, you know, like say you come into wealth, for example,
Mhm.
it's like and this is kind of an invisible thing. We're like, oh, I feel so bad for you, but it's a responsibility, right? And people who really own this responsibility and care and want to make an impact and want to be um, effective in that impact,
Mm,
and whether it's effectively measuring or effectively really solving a problem or really looking at like, wow, what can I actually impact with this? How do I want to deploy it? And like first you have to come into alignment with your values
mm,
and really understand that and then really learn what are the various ways you can deploy this, right? Is it philanthropy? Is it impact investing? Is it public markets so that you can have a certain type of return so that you can be a shareholder activist? Is
mm,
it straight up philanthropy, which is a full-time job? If you have $500 million, philanthropy is a full-time job unless you hire somebody else or you set up a family office. And so I'm speaking fast. There's a lot of different variables, but these are the kinds of conversations, and it always comes back to the inner. It's very easy, just as a business, like as you're doing the business,
mhm,
coaching that you do. It's easy to get into the mechanics and the business strategies and everything, and the art is holding the polarity at all times of like the strategy and the inner outer, and always being able to like coming back to shifting the energetics or the healing or transforming. Healing indicates there's something to be healed. However, if we're always in our perfect natural state, how do we get there? But it is that constant, I think, balance between strategy and holding space for the soul.
mm, mhm. Wow. Yeah, it totally makes sense to me. And I'm wondering when somebody comes across your work and is ready to work with you, how long does this, process take on average, that beginning process? Is it maybe a year? Because what you shared is inner work, mental, emotional, spiritual, all the different feels, like that totally makes sense. That is its own segment. And then going the outer, doing the numbers and calculating how much is truly enough, and then
Yeah.
surplus. And then be like, okay, what can we do with this? What are my values? What are the deployment vehicles? If somebody comes into money like that, millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars, boom, like that, what is that initial foundational period typically last?
Mm. It doesn't even have to be that it- all numbers count, right? It could be like a lot less than that, and
Mm,
it's a similar process, depending, right? Depending where people are at in their journey and the complexity of their scenario. But the process is, it depends where the person's at. Everyone's not always like, yeah, I'm ready to jump in for 18 months.
yeah.
Typically, like, 18 months. A few clients, like for three, we're in their third year right now.
Mm,
Um, it really depends
yeah.
on what um what the scenario or where they are in their journey. Someone who's all in, it's like, we'll usually start with a 6 month,
Hmm.
and then it's like, okay, let's do a year now. I get it, you know and then so it's an ever evolving journey.
Hmm.
um One of the things that is really interesting too is, people say inheritors who are part of a family, and say there's one person in the family that has this real desire to make change, and yet that's the old structure. And this is kind of like the hologram, right? Like what we're doing right now. It's like the old structure, the old part of the family wants, in traditional to deploy traditionally. And so there's various ways you can look at a portfolio and do a carve out, like, okay, we'll give you this, just get this much. And so it's also coaching people in those courageous conversations with family,
Mm,
where, gosh, family and conversations around money is a whole ball in itself, right? So depending on the complexity of those relationships and dynamics, um, but starting small, maybe, okay, getting a carve out, and then how do you deploy that? And then maybe you show the results. Look, there's impact and there's returns, financial returns. And
mm,
so again, like everyone is different. There's some, a client who is in a family business, and it's like they're it's brick and mortar, for lack of a better
mm,
word.
mhm,
And it's a big business and with a big impact. And well, how do you and you want to create living systems everywhere. How do you make that change when the board is, you're dealing with people who are in their 70s and you know, how do you change them? And so it's really this process of helping master that art of conscious influence. Like, how do you influence that part before you even deal with money or the capital or the changes? You have to influence other people. I'm going all over the place, but it's like I think I'm 50 and I've been on this journey a long time and I wear a lot of hats. And I know
Mm.
you wear a bunch of hats. When you wear a lot of hats, you can't always market all the hats 'cause it's confusing. And I have to say, I get frustrated sometimes in that because marketing is just like a thing that could just go away, right? So it's like, how do you actually explain who you are and what you do when it's so much? And so sometimes it's like, oh, someone identifies you as one thing and that's where you start. And then it's like, oh, I can help you with that. Oh, yes, and that too, and that too. So it's not always like, here's the whole Monty, step in for 5 years, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this all makes complete sense to me, and I feel it as well. And wow, yeah, the simple thing, impact investing, coming into a lot of money, like there's so many nuances and flavors and categories within that
Yes.
umbrella. And yeah, as you're sharing, yeah, I'm just really seeing that, from the where does it go? How do I feel about it? How do others feel about it? Other people around me, like there's a whole thing. And I really see how it's very helpful to have someone with your experience be experienced in all ranges of that and be able to be that person in somebody's corner for that through that I feel like a foundational period, as well as,
Mhm.
okay, maybe it's after that first foundational, then life doesn't end, like it continues and there's different nuances and things come up. So to have a person like
Mm,
yourself in their corner, and also to have the context on them and their values to, hey, I'm looking at this investment or this happened to this investment, be able to stay in contact with you almost like on call in a certain way. I
yeah.
can see huge value. And I'm not just saying that because you're on the show. It's like, yeah, I really see how there's so many layers to the simple thing of impact investing,
Yeah.
especially when a person comes into a lot of money.
Yeah. I appreciate that reflection. It's really interesting because, in as a space holder,
Mhm.
it's like imperative that you don't assert your agenda. I'm an
Mm,
activist also, right? And I have a voice and I speak my truth.
mhm.
And when you're holding space for somebody, it's like you're holding space for them. And when they want the advising and they want the trusted advisor, and like, so there's this interesting dance of sometimes just having to zip it because
Right.
and example is I had a client who started a fund.
Mhm.
I also have a lot of clients who will start like who are fund managers and
Mhm.
like stewards of assets. And she started a fund um and it's focused on regenerative agriculture and alternative proteins.
Mm,
And so people like in this world of problem solving,
mhm.
we're only going to solve the big we are only going to solve to the extent of our perception, to the extent of our assumptions about reality and the problem and the solution,
Mm,
right? So some people think Bill Gates is solving the world by buying up all the farmland and like spraying poison on everything. Okay, well that they really think that that's a solution, you know? And so, well, so to navigate these spaces in order to be able to receive like to have learned and have the education that I've had, which I'm so grateful for being in certain places and spaces, I've had to zip it. I've had to zip it,
mm,
you know,
mm,
and really know with discernment when I can share or teach or open a window of perception. And for example, a fund for for supporting companies with alternative proteins. And I had this distinct pleasure of having Dr. Vandana Shiva on my podcast a few years ago, which is like the best honor of my life. She's like a Shiro forever for me. And
mm.
Vandana Shiva.
No.
Okay, so like if you search for her after Dr. Vandana Shiva is an Indian woman, an elder, who in the 80s was exposing Monsanto and
Oh,
um,
wow.
life and yeah, GMOs. And but she's brilliant. She's written tons of books and she's just like the voice on uh truth speaker, let's just say. And I share this because the words that came out of her mouth were so funny when she was talking about like alternative proteins, this blood, soy, fake GMO, blah, blah, blah. I can't even redo it. But the
Yeah.
point, right? The point is like looking at fake foods and alternative proteins and things that are called like plant-based and stuff. So what I'm sharing here is like this I had to kind of zip my mouth while this process of starting this fund. And then I finally had this window where I was like, I want to, where I was able to educate on alternative proteins, like be very explicit what you're talking about. Is it like natural or is it GMO? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Am I being vague or does this make sense?
Definitely makes sense to me. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So let's go
Went
into
down a road.
there. I'm really curious to hear your insights on it because, yeah, and I'll just share like my personal feelings. So, with like say plant-based stuff and alternative proteins and such, I see a future where like I could see that being helpful, technology based. I'm also aware, like in the beginning, probably not going to be even close to that. Whereas like in my personal opinion, a lot of like plant-based stuff, there's so many chemicals and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
whoa, yikes. Okay. And alternative proteins, it's like made in a lab. Like, I feel like something gut feeling just isn't there, but I'd
Yeah.
like it to continue and see what can be made in the future, because if we're all on different planets as humans, spacefaring humans, probably going to need something. We're not going to be like growing, or not growing, but having cows in space and such. So I like where it's going, but at the same time I am kind of wary of the you know natural pace of innovation, which is the beginning. Things get rocky. So do you ever have people who see it where like, I like where this is going, I'm not buying into like the hype of like where it is right now, but maybe it can help it in the future? Or is it more like, let's make sure the values, or not really the values, but make sure like the solutions are exactly what we want all the way through?
Yeah, yeah. I'm on the same page as you. And there are like all companies that are startups, for example, and this is what I was saying is like really distinguishing between these, say, like in your pitch deck, that
Mhm.
because it is very different. And so it's going to attract a different investor if there is like an alternative protein that's a seed that is a seed from a tree that you're also protecting, you know, forests and
Mm,
co- and it's like forest conservation that is producing the seed that is an alternative protein
mm.
also versus the lab technical GMO yeast blah 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 protein thing.
Got it. So what I'm hearing
Yeah.
is like being very clear on, it's a lot of truth, of like where it is, where does it come from, what's the plan, and not just like lumping things together because plant-based is good or XYZ is good or whatever, flavor of the day. Would that be accurate? Like the
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like this is the same thing with as an environmentalist to sustainability to regenerative to impact,
hmm,
these words, right? What happened to vegetarian? Like or like plant-based is so broad. It's like, what even is that? If chemicals and all the weird fake stuff can be included in that, and that's okay. Like it's just one of those words that's like, woo, smoke and mirrors. So I
yeah,
don't use that word ever
okay,
in my own vocabulary, like, and I don't understand it really. Um, yeah,
yeah,
plant-based, is it plants or is it plant-based? Like, I don't understand. And I think there's this beautiful term. Have you ever heard of the term psychic numbing?
yes, yeah,
Okay, I forgot the name of the author. A book called Psychic Numbing.
hmm,
And for listeners, this is like the effect of, you know, 40 million starving people. It's like such a big number. We can't even, it's cognitive dissonance. It like doesn't even like land because it's like, I can't do anything about that. That's over there.
hmm,
Or climate. Such
hmm,
a big thing, right? Versus nature. and like the trees or water. So these words that have an effect, like that sound word magic power thing. Um, and so plant-based is another one of those words for me that
Mm.
just sort of shoo, 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 shoo.
Yes, precision with the words. Question for you, tracking the impact. So say a person has the resources, they know their surplus, and then they are deploying it in a cause, aka mission, connected with the
Mhm.
mission, and they're using precise language and making sure that it's exactly through all the way through. What does tracking the solutions, the progress look
Yeah.
like? Typically, is it something where maybe there's the 17 global goals and then somehow you're tracking it within there? Or is it within that vector, that business, investment and seeing how many lives are impacted or which different thing is? Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on tracking the progress.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. And it's there are various organizations and modalities. Like there's something called the Impact Management Project. There are like organizations like Tonic. It's an impact investing community. There's organizations that have created like portfolio management tools.
Hmm.
Now I think more asset management companies are integrating these tools in their businesses, but there's asset management tools that can track your investments in alignment with the 17 goals or other goals or whatever the metrics are that you're tracking. It's a really it's a really complex
Mm-hmm.
it, science, I think. I don't know what you call it. It's a complex field
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of really smart minds are playing with. And it's interesting to say the least, because at the end of the day, there's like effective altruism and effective giving and all of these different kind of schools of thought
Mm-hmm.
that create like they're kind of like bases if you're playing softball or baseball and you're running the bases and you're like, let me try this base out, let me see, where do I belong, like which base am I on here? Because like effective altruism is a pretty hardcore uh mindset, I guess. I don't even know what to call it, like a school of thought
Yeah.
that it like says it just giving from your heart is a waste. It's effectively saying that to be an effective altruist, to be an effective giver, or have an effective impact, you have to be strategic about it. And so there's ways, it's very interesting, but like ways to look at or study impact. And there's organizations that do this, but just say impacting poverty, for example. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, what is and tracking what is the effect of me donating to this organization that is feeding 100 people in my neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
versus donating to this organization that has like some effective way of scaling the impact.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's numbers based. How
Mm-hmm.
many people ate versus Joe, who I met at the train station the other day, ate.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
Yeah. Question for you, in terms of the allocation of philanthropy, so charities versus investment vehicles, that are a for benefit business essentially. And so the entrepreneur space is typically a feeling of rather invest in like a business that's creating solutions, self-sustainable, rather than charities. And there's mixed feelings, but that's generally the feeling across the board. Um,
Mm,
do you typically tend to see or have any thoughts on like the models? Because I feel like it's with anything, there's great charities, right? But then there's also this feeling of like, are they sustainable? Are they spending more time fundraising? But that
yeah.
is, you need to get the money from somewhere, and versus something that is able to solve the problems, be self-sustainable. Like for example, if just use a broad example, like Elon Musk with Tesla electric vehicles, like if that would have been a nonprofit, would that have been able to be self-sustaining or not? Yeah, so just curious in your thoughts of like, is there a time or a way to distinguish philanthropy funds versus like investment vehicle funds, even if it's focused on the same problems being solved?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's every investor and philanthropist or deployer has a different, strategy, and there's tax incentives,
Mm,
there's strategy for creating a portfolio, like a portfolio approach to impact versus, okay, just philanthropy, right? A portfolio approach is looking at the whole
mm,
and saying, like looking at all the different asset classes and philanthropy as an asset class, impact investing as an asset class. And then even within impact investing, there's lots of ways you can have, sub asset classes. Could have real estate as an asset class. So looking at it from a whole portfolio, or again, looking at it like as a carve out, you're going to do a carve out over here, just this chunk for
mm,
philanthropy. Sometimes people who are like really, hands on might be testing,
mm,
like, okay, we'll do a carve out and see what happened, and
mm,
do some direct deals and see how that goes in terms of measuring impact, or there's so many different ways this works. And I am not like the expert at this. This is I'd like to be, actually. But it's like such a there's so many tentacles, and I know so many people who are like pioneers in this space that are, um there's a whole other lens now of looking at systems change. And okay, we can just so affecting this one area versus looking at a whole system and like the financial system, or like how do you even do that? What's a systems change approach for investing
mm,
or deploying capital, whether it's in philanthropy or investing? Then there's different types of impact investing too. There's like catalytic capital. Like you invest in something, but you don't expect like there's times where you invest in something and you'd like a return, but you don't expect it. There's slow returns, short returns. There's so many different things. It's kind of complex. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Catalytic Capital. Never heard that. I feel like it's getting the party started, but
Getting the
not
party
necessarily need
started.
to continue. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, people can learn more about your work at stephanietrager.com. And
Yeah.
we'll do a summary here before we officially wrap up. But before we get into that segment, I know you have a free gift for everybody,
Mm,
a free masterclass. And yeah, so I'd love to hear about that. I'll include the link, by this video and such. So yeah, the free
mm,
gift that you have.
mm. So the it's called a liberation, owning our power as creators.
Mm,
And this is a sort of it's a workshop.
mhm,
So there's a, workbook, and it's the workshop that is really taking through a modality where, we are all, no matter whether like stepping out of the lens of deploying capital, we all have our capitals, right? And part of what we're all wanting is belonging and purpose, right? Feeling like we're making a contribution.
mm,
Our contribution is wanted. That's that belonging piece. And
mm,
so when no matter where we are on our journey, sometimes we're, redirecting, pivoting, or whatever, we bump up against those old identities. And like, remember I was saying before, if I just didn't have to market, marketing has become a thing. It's like, that's your business now, right? Like, you got to be in the business of marketing, and can no longer just be in the business of what you're doing. Maybe it was always that way, but this is where we bump into those identity pieces. Um and I like to say that I'm going to wrap this up here quickly, but the old identities are part of the program, like the old programming. And so how much of our day to day do we go through creating from that programmed creator place, as the programmed creator? And that's our old identity. And what we really want is to create from purpose, right? That more
mm,
heart-centered place. Yay, we got there. But now we need a brand. And then that becomes part of our identity too. So now it's our purpose identity.
mm,
And then what? Like, what happens when we get stuck in that place once we've reached the Holy Grail, our purpose? And that is that when we're leaning to, and you've said this a bunch of times in this conversation, leaning towards higher purpose. And
mm,
what is what kind of creator are we when we're in higher purpose? This is where we get to be quantum creators and really like bypass the old matrix. And so that's what this liberation is all about. It's that taking people through this journey and owning our power as creators.
mm. Amazing. And everybody can go to stephanietrager.com/liberation-2030. And I'll have that link here. And yeah, thank you so much for that free gift. And I really feel like that's special, of getting in that identity of that person who is on purpose, on mission, their values, where their capital is an extension of their values. So that workshop sounds amazing.
Thank you.
And yeah, absolutely. So now I'm going to do a brief summary here and then pitch it over to you for a last concept or thing that you'd like to share. And so what we went through today is starting off the types of investing, just ROI investing, number one. Number two, no harm investing. Number three, contributing to solutions. And of course, getting that ROI as well. The 6 types of capitals: financial, intellectual, human, social, natural, manufactured. And really talking about how an ecosystem can be synergistic, where it's working together, rather than a bunch of gears that are like grinding and a bunch of friction, instead of things that are, smooth and flowing together. And realizing that we are at such a unique time in human history right now, where there's crazy things going on with the planets. And we know, like you said, the moon moves the ocean. So in a very practical way, we know that what is happening out there affects the magnetics in the earth, which then affects the water in our body, because we're like, what, 60, 70, 80% water, something like that. So that affects the things in our brain, which is our mood. So it all trickles down. And really what you shared about is like a person being connected to their mission, and how that is more than just a cause that's separated from us. It's integrating. How can these things be synergistic? And really the stages that you have guided people through when they come into a bunch of money of some type, and the inner work, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetics, that being the identity piece, which is why that workshop I feel like is such a great, next step. And then doing the numbers, how much is truly enough, model that out, map that out, then the surplus, then the values, and then the vehicles for the capital to flow. And yeah, so with all of that being said, I'd love to pitch it back to you of a final closing thought or message that you'd like to share with everybody listening today.
First, I'm really wowed by your listening, and just even reflecting back all of the takeaways. Yeah, like it lands it's like, okay, this is useful. So thank you for listening and receiving. And one takeaway is the seventh. There's many capitals. We can play with this all day, but just to really feel into that seventh capital, like our crown chakra, which is spirit, the energetic capitals. And that is really where we get to play in transforming our perception of all the capitals. And that's actually where I'd say that links to our higher power, our higher purpose as quantum creators.
Absolutely. Spirit capital. Amazing. So that'll bring us to a close for today. If a person's listening here and they're an established coach, you can go to dreamteamnetwork.ai. It's an invite-only referral network for established coaches. And with that being said, thank you, Stephanie, for being on the show.
Thank you, Sebastian.